Aloha, everyone. Thank you for being here today. My name is Sabrina, and I'm the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Coordinator for the East West Center. We formally started the DEI initiative at the East West Center this year through the formation of a permanent DEI committee. And I'm absolutely honored to be part of an initiative that has received so much support throughout the center and from our broader community. But as you know, our DEI work, while our DEI work was more formalized this year, the East West Center has really been at the forefront of developing programs, research, and activities that speak to and promote cross-cultural understanding and awareness since its founding. As such, it's no surprise that a lot of our alumni are leaders in this field. One such example is Amy Agbayani, an East West Center alum who came to the East West Center in the 1960s from the Philippines and later went on to start the Office of Student Equity, Excellence, and Diversity at the University of Hawaii, which expanded into one of the most comprehensive diversity programs in the nation. We're thrilled that Amy will be receiving the EWCA Outstanding Volunteer Award tomorrow at the conference. And we're so inspired by Amy and all of our alumni who have really committed themselves to the principles of diversity, equity, and inclusion through their work at the center and beyond. Our panel today is called A Global Look at DEI Core Conversations, which highlights alumni who are not only making an impact in their communities, but who can also speak to the ways in which their work engages with a larger global audience. It's an extreme honor to introduce our two alumni speakers for this session, Martin Yang and Farzana Nayani. Thank you for being here. Martin Yang is the founder and director of the China AIDS Walk Fund and a consultant to the UNDP China, Aaron Diamond AIDS Research Center at Columbia University, and Wenfeng Foundation. He has 12 years of experience in research, development, and operations in the nonprofit sector. He has served as a program officer at the Beijing Gender Health Education Institute, where he initiated an all-gender toilet campaign and co-directed China AIDS Walk. He was also a special assistant to the board chair and senior communication manager at IU Foundation, and a program assistant for the Southern China program of the Rockefeller Brothers Fund. Martin Yang was a 2014-2015 Asia Pacific Leadership Program Fellow at the East West Center, where he initiated the LGBTQ Plus Story Project and conducted 5 months of field research in Southeast Asia and Greater China to study the ecosystem of LGBTQ Plus communities. He earned a Bachelor of Arts in Anthropology from Sun Yat-sen University. Welcome, Martin. Next, I would like to introduce Farzana Nayani. Farzana is a recognized DEI specialist, business and strategy coach, and international keynote speaker. She has worked with Fortune 500 corporations, public agencies, higher education institutions, school districts, and nonprofit organizations as a consultant and trainer on diversity and inclusion, intercultural communication, supplier diversity, and employee engagement. Farzana's advisory work with employee resource groups, small business advocacy and entrepreneurship, and racial equity and inclusion has taken her to engagements across North America, from the White House to Silicon Valley. Farzana's expertise has been featured in media outlets such as the Wall Street Journal, Forbes, Diversity Inc., Parents Magazine, NPR, the Washington Post, Marie Claire, and the LA Times. Her new book, Raising Multicultural Children, Tools for Nurturing Identity in a Racialized World, with North Atlantic Books, released in 2020 and is distributed by Penguin Random House. Connect with Farzana through news and updates by visiting farzananayani.com or via social media channels at Farzana Nayani. Thank you so much, Farzana, for being part of this session. And with that, I will kick it off to you.
Thank you so much, Sabrina, and so excited to be here today with fellow alumni. As I mentioned earlier, I graduated in 2006 from the East West Center and the University of Hawaii at Manoa, and really rooting it in all of that experience with cross-cultural understanding and the research that I had done while I was on the islands is part of the inspiration for my passion for diversity, equity, and inclusion. Today, we're going to talk about that as it relates to you and how this topic can be looked at from a global perspective. And I'm going to share a few minutes about what I'm seeing as the key things that I'm working on in terms of raising awareness about diversity, equity, and inclusion, and how we as a global community can take it forward and really be inspired and motivated to make that transformational change. So, in terms of my own personal background, my mother's from the Philippines and my father's actually from Pakistan by way of India. So, my identity is something that I bring into the conversation as we look at how different communities are experiencing diversity in the workplace, and also leaders like yourselves are looking at how there is so much diversity in the workplace, yet at the same time there is so much more that we can do, and that's where equity and inclusion comes in. So inclusion is that feeling of belonging, that feeling of making sure that everyone who's at the table has a voice and has the ability to influence and shape and contribute the organizations and institutions we're a part of. But equity is something that a lot of communities have struggled with, and that's really looking at how accessibility and fairness to all groups has been ushered in. And we can see in the last year and a half how the global movement for Black lives and how the initiatives around anti-Asian racism have caused us to really have a reckoning in ourselves as individuals and as a global community about what we can do, and to really deepen the cause around this and the commitment. So as we think about what's important and what's next, one thing I'd like to encourage us to think about is how we integrate this naturally into our existing processes. DEI should not be something that's bolted on or tacked on, or is a trend that you check off for now and then forget about later. It really is the deep dedication and committed work of individuals like Amy Agbayani and like so many of you at the East West Center in your institutions to be able to use your power and influence to create that change. I myself am being exposed to so many different environments where people are committing and they are showing that momentum. And at the same time, there's fatigue. There's fatigue from people who come from marginalized communities who have been talking about this before recent times. And so it's time to turn an ear and listen to them, to use our ability to uplift and surface the different issues, and to really look at the causes that have been at place in our countries and in our environments. And the awakening around this and the understanding that's needed to create that global unity is something that will take deepening into discomfort, and at the same time, the hopefulness that creates this balance of being able to support diversity, equity, and inclusion. As we turn to what is happening now, I want to share a couple of things that I'm seeing. One is that we're seeing, a real global look and commitment to this. And if you have been one who has been in support of this for many years, now's the time to strike while the iron's hot and to leverage resources to bring press and awareness to the cause and to the initiatives. If you're someone who's new to this and are looking to learn, the other part of being in a pandemic is you have now resources that you wouldn't have had before unless you were able to fly to a conference. And so the virtual experience we're in right now is actually giving us the access and opportunity to be able to grow and learn from each other. So we're seeing a lot of cross-pollination happening in ways that were unimagined. So this conference is one of those things. And as we continue to reconnect with each other and look at new ways to be creative to address all of these fronts, part of what we can do is share resources. So as we heard from others today, there's just a lot that can be done. There's a lot of reconnection taking place and a lot of working together that's now coming from being apart and siloed to creating community together. So with that's my initial take on this topic, and we're going to invite Martin Yang back up to the stage. Martin.
Hi, Farzana. Thank you very much for the opening talk. And I'm really glad that you mentioned some of the issues here. I have one question before I start my talk. Is that you mentioned the pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic, such a huge disruption to the whole society. If we think we want to promote DEI globally, what will be some of the opportunities in the next 5 years, in your opinion?
That's a great question, Martin. Thank you for that. You use the word, disrupt or something of that nature, and we're really in that. We're in a time where the disruption has actually caused us to rethink the way that we do things, the way that systems are created, and that actually gives us an opportunity to reform our processes and our mindsets. And there was a study done actually on this where the research shows that the pandemic, although it's caused us to transition and to really, pause and think about what we're doing and redo some of the ways that we have been leading, it's actually a really good time for diversity, equity, and inclusion, because as the foundation is being rattled, we can insert these ways that can try to overcome bias, or that can start to support more inclusive thinking and practices. So although the foundation is rattled with the pandemic, that's the secondary opportunity. Another thing is what I was talking about around the virtual connections. And so we're seeing a lot more of the collaboration among different countries and regions. And so you'll see that probably in a number of different areas and institutions, that there's now more global connection. And before, we had been working towards that, right? It was always something that we were committed to, but because of the pandemic putting everyone online and virtual, now we're being even more encouraged to, and actually catapulted into those connections in a more deeper way that we didn't have the opportunity to before. So those are the things that I'm seeing in terms of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I don't know if you wanted to chime in with that as well.
It's interesting that you think that you feel with the virtual space, people have more opportunities to engage with each other. And I'd like to slightly revert to like a different direction. So during the pandemic, we see there are name calling, there are blaming, there are people who think probably, for example, the virus is from here, and then the variances are based there, and then it brings up some of the racial conversations in different places. And what's your intake on that?
That this is another great point. I'm so glad we're in conversation. We can't ignore the devastating effects of COVID-19 and also the racism that has resulted as a result of how governments, quite frankly, and also other leaders have responded with the rhetoric. And in particular, there has been a lot of blame put towards the Asian region for COVID. That is unfortunate and is something that is a byproduct of actually an existing, look at, xenophobia and, fear of other people. So that uplifted that. Another part of the impacts of COVID-19 are that marginalized communities have been affected. And in the United States, the death and the impact of COVID, in addition to the Black and Native American communities, the third largest deaths of minority communities are actually Pacific Islanders. And that's not something that people know or that talk about it unless you're part of that community. But we have to uplift that. And it's something that just shows the disparities that are systemic around the blame is on pre-existing conditions. But why is that? It's because of the global trade around food and access to nutrition, et cetera, right? And awareness to how historic impacts of the connections among countries at an economic level have created that disparity. So it's so deep, and those things surface now more in a pronounced way. So we're left with two options. We're left with that despair of how bad it is, and as you can see, I lean towards the hopefulness in balance with recognition of the reality, and the things that you mentioned coexist at the same time. We are at a time where, and that's why this conversation is happening today, because the alumni themselves have raised the horn to say that this is an important conversation. So I am motivated and inspired to see what will happen next.
Great. That's a very good conversation, and I look forward to more conversations in the later time, both with you and also with other attendees.
Thank you.
Thank you. So for now, I'll speak a little bit about my experience. As currently, I'm working on the major issue. I want to focus on the intersectional field of gender, health, and community participation. Specifically, my work has been closely around three issues. The first, the HIV/AIDS and sexual health. I wanted to provide and bring the equal and accessible health services to people of marginalized communities, such as the gay, bisexual, and other men who have sex with men in China, and as well as in other parts of the world. Second is I'm looking at the needs, especially the essential needs of LGBTQ community, and I really hope that to help this community to get the social acceptance and equal treatment in the society. And lastly, the third piece of my work has been around child protection. During the pandemic, we discovered, well, it's also beyond the pandemic. Actually, there are a lot of domestic violence, school bullying, and other gender-based violence towards children. So I'm trying to do something around that to work with different communities, families, schools, and NGOs to try to mitigate this. The reason why I want to do this is because I see the concept of equality and diversity and inclusion is that it's based on human needs. It's who we are, and people need to be part of the wider community. And then there has to be a grasp, right? The grasp should be the health needs. It's the most basic. Everybody has this need. And in the United States Sustainable Development Goals, well-being and health are listed as number 3 SDG goal. And I think it's a very good entry point to start thinking and doing something for people of different communities. So that's the perspective on health. And the second point is that community participation is crucial in solving any of the challenges in the current world. Without any participation from diverse communities, for example, they are either from a culturally diverse communities, or they're from different age populations, they're from different geographic areas, they're from different educational backgrounds. We need to include people in the whole process of making decisions. So all the decisions either is about the welfare of their community or about any social policies. We should get different voices, and we try to seek a balanced opinion and design a better approach to address some of the challenges. And then gender perspective, as we just discovered, conversed, gender is a nature, right? It's nature in almost everybody. And gender is represented and performed in our daily life. Gender, it could be gender equality, both men and women, and also gender diversity for LGBTQ, for LGBTQ communities, and then we need to put gender health and community participation in one framework. And for the future, well, also thinking of the COVID-19 pandemic, because that's one major disruption that we all face right now. Thinking of that and also looking for the next 5 years, I think the opportunities are there. However, it's very challenging. So the question that drives me to go beyond this point, beyond the COVID-19 pandemic, is that how can we, provide better equipment to activism? That's where I've been doing for social and community activism. How can we bring in research, to use research to shed light on the activism, and also to use research, especially community-based research, to guide us to have further understanding of the issue, and then to try to change the attitude and the cultural norms and policies in the field of gender, health, and philanthropy and community. So that's my major take. I'm thinking of using multiple cross-disciplinary research methods to do more research on community needs, on the comprehensive sexual and health gaps and services, and then on the activism, like where we need to mobilize students, young people to join the global DEI movement, and also to promote equality and gender equality health services in our own communities. Thank you.
Martin, thank you so much for sharing. It is so inspiring to hear about the work that you've been involved with, and in particular, just learning about the specific issues that you're involved with regards to gender identity and access and awareness and understanding. I'm wondering if you can, begin to elaborate, connecting back to the global look at diversity, equity, and inclusion, what you see as the challenges. You talked about the opportunities, and already you mentioned some of the challenges. I'm wondering if you could, speak more to that so we can start to think and prepare ahead.
Great question. I think there are many challenges, of course, in promoting diversity, equity, and inclusion globally. But I think the first one I can think of is how can we embrace the concept of this DI? It's still a relatively new concept. And then people usually, well, for many people, well, at least for many people I interact with, it's still not part of their daily life. They don't specifically think about diversity, equity, and inclusion are important for themselves and for others. So there's a lack of awareness. That's the first one. First challenge, we need to help people to really start thinking, to go beyond this point, to move forward and to live a sustainable life. It's important to think of DI and use this framework and perspective to look at things in our daily lives. And second, there is a strong foundation or strong tradition in many cultures. For example, in Asian cultures, in the Chinese culture, people are thinking more like monogamous, right? Unanimously. It's a whole one big society and one big country, and a family means a lot of things, and individuals are not so important for etc. So there are a lot of attitudes, cultural norms, and habitat and cultural norms and social norms that affect people's idea on DEI. So with this strong belief in traditional culture or in family, like just a solo family-oriented culture, that will limit people on their understanding of other people, of who they are, and how can we treat each person differently, individually. And then the third one is, of course, it's some of the new challenge that we see from the pandemic. For example, during the pandemic, because so many people are forced to stay at home, there will be an increasing number of cases of domestic violence. Some violences are around children-parents relationship. Some others are because their kids or their adult kids are LGBTQ, and they cannot, well, of course, they have to face this, but then their parents would choose a very negative way to interact with them. And some other people who are HIV positive, they have to take hard medicine daily. Once they're in their home, there's no way that they can do that privately. So their parents would discover they are HIV positive, and there's a lot of discrimination, stigma around people living with HIV. And lastly, the whole pandemic gave us a new concept of how we interact with each other, both domestically and how can we interact with others online, and how we behave or how we position ourselves in the society. So that's some of the challenges I think are very pressing.
What you shared brings up something for me that I have also seen as a challenge overall with DEI, in that, when I was studying my master's in intercultural communication, the focus was on cross-cultural understanding and intercultural awareness. And at the same time, the activism work that I did on campus and on the islands, those two things need to come together. And what you shared in your examples was that it was the cross-cultural awareness of the cultural norms, right? And at the same time, equity and access and inclusion. And that is actually, the next step is how to bring that together. And sometimes those two sides of the house don't talk, right? And so I think the intersection and the intersectionality that you share is where we can go with a global look at diversity, equity, and inclusion. It's overdue. And at the same time, it's so interesting to be able to have that knowledge base that you have, or that many of the alumni bring, to be able to really approach those issues. So just want to thank you for that. And also I appreciate this conversation that we're having all together as a group.
Likewise. Thank you very much. Cool.
All
I
right.
think we're going
thank
to
you,
enter
Martin
into
and
separate rooms,
Farzana,
right?
for a very
You can...
interesting conversation, and really appreciate the back and forth. Great questions. So thanks again. I hope everyone learned some interesting new ideas over the past 20 minutes from our alumni. Now it's time to have a chat about it. We have about 100 people in our stage at this point. So we will be moving to breakout rooms. So just in a second, you will see a black box on your screen, and that will say the word join conversation. I'll ask you to confirm your video and audio. Just click let's go, and that will magically transport you to the breakout room. In your room, you will meet up to 6 new friends. These are also your fellow alumni. And these are totally random. No one is choosing these, so it will be a big surprise. So when you are in the breakout room, you will also see questions appear that will help you guide your discussion. So there will be a couple of questions. And first question is, what is happening in your community on this topic? Another question is, what's working? And who are the people and organizations doing effective work? And the last guiding question is, what is possible? Do you have an invitation to collaborate, offer support, or helpful connection? So you will also see a 15-minute break countdown on your screen. And when you're close to ending, we'll get an announcement that breakout room will be closing. One housekeeping note: once you are inside the breakout room, please remember the number of your breakout room or someone in that room, so that in case you lose connections, you can head back to the main stage and our staff will help you to navigate back to the room you joined. So we hope to see you in the breakout room soon and start having great conversations together. All right. All right. Welcome back. Hope you had a great chat in your breakout rooms and got to meet new friends in our Ohana. So hope these conversations can help you imagine and carry out your next big idea or big action or big collaboration with others. So please keep in touch with people you talk to, and also remember you can message them directly in the chat box too. So it's now time for some Q&A, and I would like to invite our facilitators to submit questions in the Q&A tab in the chat box. And if you have a question, please type it in the chat box. One cool thing, if someone asks a question you like, you can click the arrow up to vote for that question to be asked. Okay, our alumni expert will choose few of your questions right now. Alumni expert, over to you.
Hi, everyone. We're back, and we're so excited to do the Q&A portion. Martin, you were in a discussion, so was I, and we'd love to see more Q&A coming in the Q&A section. But Martin, was there anything that you heard in any of your rooms that would be interesting for the main group to hear?
Yeah, I was briefly in one room, and sorry I didn't see a lot of things in my room. And also I was abruptly left the group, sorry. But then I heard that people are saying, for example, in the United States, things are, for example, for women's rights, women-related issues, things are, it seems like there's a going backwards trend, but gladly there are organizations such as EWC is initiating a DEI initiative. I think people are saying there's a kind of promising trend. So I'm thinking it's well, we all agree it's a bit too early to say if all these DI initiatives, what would that bring about? But gladly, it's already happening, and we see we won't have hope in the future. And you, what have you heard?
Yeah, the room that I was in, we're talking about the transition for people working from home, and then the gender disparity around women doing like the caretaking of the children and preparing food and doing their work, and then just that inequity there. So it's interesting to hear that. And again, it comes back to the cultural considerations of norms and how we work together. And, you know, that actually could lead to one of our questions that has been voted up here, which I can start to answer here. How can DEI be ensured for Afghan women, especially if the Taliban gain more territorial control? And, you know, the initial answer is that with any movement, the most marginalized are affected the hardest. So I would say that the encouragement of looking at human rights violations in general is the strategy. And by nature of starting with that, you're going to support women. At the same time, it's political, it's economic. As we know, there are reasons for, you know, the reach, the opioid fields, the everything that's related to that, religion. And those are complex questions that go beyond diversity, equity, and inclusion or gender. It goes into everything the East West Center stands for and around raising awareness for global community building and access. So that would be my initial take. Martin, do you want to add to that, or you can take another new question?
Oh, I have very little knowledge about the topic you just mentioned, but I see many other great questions here. For example, this question, I think it's very interesting. It says, young people are active in community participation. How can we leverage off their social movement power? I like this. Well, young people are the future of any society, right? And also young people will get older, and there will be even younger people that are taking over the society. I think yes, it's they do have a lot of power potentials. Well, one way we're doing this is that we organize leadership training. I think for the young people, they definitely need access to information, to skills, to knowledge, to toolkits. And second, they need to have a perspective, a wider range of perspectives. So we bring young people in to see different organizations, different sectors of the society, for the market, business, government, and NGOs, and we want them to experience the society themselves. Second, once they have the access to training, access to knowledge and all this, they also need a little bit resources to experiment on their ideas. So we provide participatory small grants to support young people and to let them make mistakes and to let them try and learn. Also, of course, we're not aiming at failure, but we encourage them to think creatively and using resources smartly. But it doesn't matter if the result they are trying isn't working. At least they're learning something. And last, I think it's important to have them have a conversation with others, just like this, because if they only live their own little world, it won't change the world positively. But they have to learn how to communicate with others in a very peaceful, very neutral, objective way of saying things that they think they feel are right. But then they also have to listen to others and learn how to live with others, live with different people peacefully. Thank you. Back to you, Freda.
Thank you for that. Yeah, I'll add that I think that the young people social movements is inspiring. We can learn from it and be inspired ourselves. And at the same time, you're right. There's the need to work together. So that was a nice summary there. There's a really great question here that I can start to answer. And if you could chime in, it's definitely in your expertise. How important is the educational system to make young students understand LGBTQ understanding? In my country, the traditional educational system and community see as taboo subjects in Myanmar. I want to say that everywhere around the world, if people don't feel that they are included or that their identity is honored, it actually is a challenge to mental health. And we're seeing how people, really feel excluded, and that can be a problem. There are high rates of suicide and, other issues related to when that happens. And schools, communities, religious faith institutions, and then also families who don't accept people who identify in that way can really create harmful environments. So, Martin, do you want to add to that?
Oh, sure. I like this question a lot. I think it's super important to have educational system to start teaching about LGBTQ and gender. Well, in a wider sense, it's about gender, sexual, health related issues. But I do recognize that for like the public schools and for curriculum developers, sometimes it's not easy for them to first recognize there is a need to include those topics in the textbooks. Second, which in turn it doesn't reflect in the textbooks to include such a wider range of topics. Second is we don't have enough faculty members or teachers who are comfortable and knowledgeable to talk about LGBTQ issues in their daily conversations. LGBTQ is just one DI perspective, right? It's important we include like disabilities and environmental protection, local knowledge, everything. But for LGBTQ issues in many Asian cultures, gender and sexual related issues are a taboo, of course, yes. So we need to start training or providing opportunities for educators, trainers to first learn about LGBTQ issues and what's the best way to talk about that in a cultural appropriate way. And second, the third point is that in light of, it's not going to change overnight. All these educational systems, it takes time and trials and experiments. So there's another way is social learning. If we can provide, very neutral and positive and people-centered, human-centered educational materials online or through other trainings organized by NGOs, academic institutions. Well, students can choose to learn. The last one is that family, parents, and relatives, sometimes they have very little, they have very few knowledge about DEI and LGBT issues. So sometimes they will criticize classrooms and teachers who discuss LGBT issues. There's a long way to go. For example, in China, we used to have a pretty good set of teaching curriculum on gender and sexual issues, but parents think, oh, it's a little bit too over, it's a little bit too sensitive. So of course we have to, acknowledging it takes time, and we
Thank
work
you
with
for that.
parents, work with everybody. Yeah.
Yeah, I just noticed in the chat there are a lot of questions in there, and there's one that I think can wrap us up. It's DEI means different things to everyone, the range being between being pro one group, women or Black or Hispanic, versus pro inclusive of all differences, cultural, citizenship, age, physical features, life choices, and how can we bridge that gap? And I see some other ones about hiring and patriarchy. And what it comes down to is that commitment to inclusion for all, being allies, being supportive of the needs, and being pro one group isn't like being that group and no other. It just means that the needs of that group should be uplifted because there has been marginalization. So we have to get out of the idea that being pro marginalized group is being anti all the other groups. And sometimes that can happen when we are in support of a certain community if there isn't that deeper understanding and definition around DEI. So that's it for our segment, everyone. We want to thank everyone for all the amazing questions and conversation today.
That's right. Thank you so much for all these great questions. And we want to thank our alumni experts, Farzana and Martin, for answering them. And now we're going to end our core conversation with a bit of inspiration. This inspiration is coming from EWC Innovation for Sustainable Development Fellows. These fellows are young professionals and EWC alumni who are under age of 40, who are working in arts, environment, education, health, and disaster resilience sectors. We have included few of their stories at end of our core conversations to show you how they're doing and what are they doing to helping to change the world. Okay, let's have a look at this Innovation Fellow video.
Bago ko sinimulan ang tagpi-tagpi, nagtatrabaho ako bilang marine biologist sa LAMAVE o mas kilalang Large Marine Vertebrates Research Institute, Philippines. Habang nagtatrabaho ako sa mga coastal community na ito, nakita ko ang kakulangan sa oportunidad para sa mga kababaihan na kumita ng sapat at ligtas. Noong 2019, natuklasan ko ang life cycle assessment na isinagawa ng Levi's para malaman ang environmental impact ng produkto nilang Levi's 501. Bilang isang marine biologist na nagmamalasakit sa mga hayop sa dagat at sa mga tao na nakapaligid nito, naisipan kong ibahagi ang oportunidad sa pag-upcycling sa mga kababaihan sa Apo Island. Ang tagpi-tagpi ay salitang Filipino na nangangahulugang pinagtagpo o pinagdugtong. Sa pamamagitan ng tagpi-tagpi, na ibabahagi ang kaalaman sa sustainable business, women empowerment, at awareness tungkol sa fast fashion sa mga kababaihan sa coastal communities.
Ako di ay si Rebecca Sumagang Aliarces, 34 na ng edad, kapuyo sa Apo Island. Akong anak, 5 ka buok. Then ang akong trabaho karon na ako sa trabaho sa tagpi-tagpi. Sa panahon atong una, nang wala pa ning tagpi-tagpi, ang akong trabaho, mag-deliver kog mga tubig, kanang magtulod og kariton, balay-balay. Ano, maka-income nga ato, kung dagkog income unta, pero kapoy po kayo sa lawas.
Ako si Ate Lorlyn Campanya. Nagpuyo ako, 30 years old ko. Nagpuyo ko sa San Carlos before. Nga karon anak ko diri sa Dawin kay nakapangasawa ko diri sa taga Dawin og na ako'y duha ka anak og akong trabaho karon usa ko ka QC sa tagpi-tagpi. Ang akong trabaho sa una is usa ko ka housekeeping sa Anchorage. Sa atong nga trabaho dili gud siya ka sustento jud kay on call raman jud ko didto so dili jud.
Kabalo ko aning tagpi-tagpi kay giimbitar kong Lori nga magtrabaho mi sa tagpi-tagpi.
Ang rason kung nganong nisulod ko aning tagpi-tagpi, una is gusto na ko nga matabangan ako ang husband sa mga except sa financial. Gusto gud na ako pud nga ma-enjoy pud ko sa laing mga trabaho ba.
Ang Circular Economy Initiative ng Tagpi-Tagpi ay nagsisimula sa pagbibigay ng personal initiative training sa mga kababaihan. Sa tulong ng East-West Center Innovation Fellows, nakapag-invest ang Tagpi-Tagpi ng mga materyales na kinakailangan ng mga kababaihan, kagaya na lang ng sewing machine, storage box at cellular phone.
Atong kanisinantian ako atong workshop, enjoy ko kayo ko. Dagang kayong murag katong naibala nimo unsa ang pagborda, unsa nimo paglak sa imong gitahi nga dili makita ang laundress. Challenge gud kay sa ako ato. Akong nakatunan sa sa aside aton sa pagtahi nako kanang bisang gani kita gani nga mga bayi na daytay nga kahibalo ba.
A friend was introduced to Ma'am Ana, which is a friend of the owner also. Then from there, they talked about the tagpi-tagpi. Then we were interested because we would like to help them. So after that, I think they've agreed to bring the products here and display for free.
Yung experience ko sa products ng tagpi-tagpi, una, sobrang nakakatuwa kasi hello, sobrang cute. At kita-kita natin na parang handmade with love.
Katabang ang tagpi-tagpi nako kay bisan og pila ra ka buok tong among nagama. Malipayon ra ko kay kadawat among pudmig. Ganahan kaayo ko sa tagpi-tagpi kay mao na dako kay ikatabang sa among pamilya nga sa una wala pay trabaho ako ang bana. Tigaan ra mi pagkaon sa ako ang ugangan or sa igsuon sa ako ang bana. Nang sa pagkakaron hatag kay siya og para pangpalit namo sa mga mama.
Banding kami karon. Kay kung katong una nga wala pa ning tagpi-tagpi, naman ko sa layo jud kanang magsikog laag-laag kay maghatud-an ng mga tubig. Sa pag-abot sa tagpi-tagpi, mahimutang na jud kung naa sa balay.
It's important for us to support women working in social enterprises such as Tagpi-Tagpi because from there we can see na yung likas na pagiging maaruga ng mga kababaihan, hindi lang natin maikakahon sa pagiging ilaw ng tahanan. Nakikita rin to sa paraan kung paano nila natutugunan yung pangailangan ng community.
Ang Tagpi-Tagpi ay hindi lang negosyo. Ito ay isang oportunidad na maipakita ng mga kababaihan na ang kanilang creativity at resourcefulness ay may kakayahang suportahan ang kanilang pamilya. Importante na suportahan ang initiative gaya ng Tagpi-Tagpi dahil kailangang mapalawak ang awareness tungkol sa overconsumption and production, fast fashion at kakulangan ng oportunidad sa mga kababaihan.
Ang akong maistorya sa mga kababaihan nga sama nako, magpadayon ra nga lig-on nga atubangon ang problema.
Akong message ra nila sa mga labi na sa mga nanay diha sa tanang mga kababaihan kung naamo sa kalisod or sa kuan nga panghuna-huna, ayaw lang jud mo labi na sa mga ginikanan, ayaw lang jud mo og surrender, ayaw lang jud mo ingon ay dili ko ni kaya, labi na sa mga single mother karon, ayaw i-push nga to nga makaya na to ang tanan.
All right, what a beautiful video. And you can learn more about the Innovation Fellows at tomorrow's session of EWCA Today. And there's lots of videos available later if you'd like to see. So right now, before we click back to the main stage, let's have a look at the plan for the rest of the day. Please look at the bottom of your screen. And yes, so right now we finished the core conversations, and now we will be going back to the main stage for EWC today, preparing for the next 60. So I just want to give you advice that when you go back, please look at the top left corner of your screen, which looks like a hamburger, the 3 horizontal lines that will sort of look like a burger. So once you find that, just click on 2021 EWCA International Conference. Also, now is a time for a quick comfort break. Use the bathroom, get a coffee, or refill your favorite glass of wine. And in the main stage, join us for a stretch break. This is a video done by East West Center students on campus of the East West Center right now. And see you over there in a few moments.